within about a year, 90% of people are going to be dead, and it's only going to be the strongest that are going to be surviving. And it's probably it may not even be so much the prepared people that survive, it's the people who are willing to do the things that they need to do to basically survive.
Okay, Michael, first of all, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys too.
Yeah.
And thanks for wanting to participate.
Yeah, it's no problem at all.
Yeah. I have been reading or I haven't been reading your book, to be honest, but I bought it. It's kind of a, it's a book that you turn onto a page when you want to gain some specific knowledge. That's at least for me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's basically how I know you, because both me and Jacob have a huge interest within the, what can we say? Off-grid survival fields.
And just that whole lifestyle.
Being able to take care of yourself, basically.
And understanding how things are made and how to, do things yourself. So, yeah, it's a super interesting topic. And, I was basically introduced to your work through Mass. And I've also looked through the book. And we wanted to learn some more. And that's basically why we wanted to talk to you.
Cool. Yep.
Maybe you can introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself. Basically your entire history, how you got into this field. I know that you are a veteran, right?
Yes, I'm a veteran of the Canadian Forces, a reservist. And I did that for 7 years. Deployed to Bosnia in 2000, 2001 as a NATO peacekeeper. And that's kind of where a lot of, I've always been a survivalist. I've always really was into wilderness survival since the day I could read. Basically, I was reading the SAS survival guide, any survival book I could get my hands on. We had a green belt next to my house, and I would go out there and light fires, build shelters, set up little traps and stuff like that. Anything I've read about that I wanted to try out, I would try out. And when I went overseas, I saw the aftermath of a war, so I could see what happens when you remove away all the social structures and all the infrastructure, and how you have to live there. And then also that was previously a first world country. It was Bosnia and that area that they held the Olympics. The Olympics were in Sarajevo, right? So this is not a backwater and third world country. It was a first world country, and then they had a civil war. And when I saw that, and I was like, okay, well, this could happen here. It could happen anywhere. And then you start looking through history, through economic collapses of wars, civil wars, and such. We often have civilizations kind of fall, and then you end up with this totally off-grid, you have to be self-reliant type scenario. And if you aren't self-reliant, and if you don't know how to do basic things, then you don't really survive. And so that's always got me thinking about it. And I've always been looking at it, and I've always been a DIY type of guy. I'm a tradesperson as well. I'm a welder fabricator, and everything that happens even just around the house, I'm always thinking, how can I do this myself? And I only basically call people in when it's something that I don't want to tackle myself, or if it's something that's well outside my scope of skills, right? But I started writing preparedness survival content online through Ask a Prepper, and that's where the idea for the book came from. The people who run that site approached me about the book with this DIY survival projects, and of course I was on board immediately because I had already been writing some DIY content for them. And then the book started from there, and now it's been in publication since I believe 2022, so it's been out for a few years now.
Mm-hmm. What was the reason you chose to stop at the military?
It was just time to leave. I was a reservist, so I wasn't. I was basically doing it full time, but I wasn't a full-time soldier. So I got to a point where I kind of wanted to, get married, have kids, get a more established career path, and I didn't see the military as being a career path I want to continue down. So that's why I just decided part ways with the military and carry on. And that's why I became a welder and fabricator, and basically just a tradesperson, kind of a jack of all trades.
Yeah, and after the military, you went on to, was it, I'm just saying something, Boeing, or was it some plane manufacturer or something?
Well, I worked for a company that built tooling for Boeing
Okay.
to build airplanes. So I was it was in the aerospace field. It was a Canadian company. We built a lot of the tooling for the 777s, the 787s, and some 767s. Basically the tooling and machinery that helps build the aircraft is what we were manufacturing.
Okay. I mean, that's also a very good, I guess, foundation for
Mm.
doing off grid, having the military training. I guess there's also a lot of survival in that, isn't there?
Not you think it would be more, but not so much really. Like
Mm.
the military doesn't really like. There's always this kind of attitude that people have towards military, like, oh, you guys must be survival experts. But unless you take some advanced courses, you don't really get any kind of survival training. Like it's kind of, I
Hmm.
think Hollywood's done a disservice
Yeah.
to
Bear
making
Grylls have.
everyone
Yeah.
Yeah.
we're like experts at survival and stuff, but we're really not. But you do learn a lot of like field craft, like just like moving through the wilderness,
Hmm.
how to basically, sleep in the bush, how to like basically just how to like be in the woods. Like you learn that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
then you do learn some definite self-reliance because especially if you're like patrolling and stuff, you're on your own. Like you have to you have to be able to handle yourself. So you do get that self-reliant attitude, definitely from the military, but the actual survival stuff, not so much.
Okay.
Hmm. So there's no direct link between your time in the military and to the projects that you're on right now?
No, not really. It's more basically my overall self-reliance attitude that's kind of linked the two together. And then the military kind of came with that because I went on to learn those skills as well. And like the actual like self-reliance survival type stuff is it's all kind of been on my own.
Hmm.
Mm. Did you take any, what to say, what kind of positive things did you take with you from the time in the military?
Oh, I definitely learned because I was in the military in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. So this was pre-GPS, pre
Okay.
a lot of computer technology. So I learned a lot about like more primitive forms of navigation. Like I learned map and compass, and to this day, I can navigate anywhere with a map and a compass, and that's a kind of a lost art. I actually taught a course on it a few years ago for a local organization here. Like, and it's that alone is a very much a lost art.
Mm.
I also learned how like radio communication and stuff like that, where it's nowadays it's all digital. It's
Yeah.
everything is very high tech. I learned the low tech way of doing things. And those kind of that knowledge base really helps. Like even now when I'm a amateur radio operator, like I can pull off of my skills from the military about how I had to deal with things when they were like really quite primitive compared to today.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
it kind of gives me like this kind of a background that really helps with if things really went like south. Like there's a lot of things I can do that people today can't do. Like
Yeah.
even just the navigation thing is one thing I'll keep coming back to is like I can read a map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many people can read a map?
Yeah.
Like
Not
I
me.
remember
Yeah.
driving around in my truck and I had a map book. Like, and no, we didn't have before smartphones. Like I'm from that era. So it's like those skills, like it doesn't seem like a big deal, but like if you lose the grid, if you lose cell communication and your smartphone doesn't work and you got to get across town, how many people can actually read a physical paper
Mm.
map, have one,
Yeah.
to begin with, and then can actually navigate themselves across town? Like, a lot of people rely on that so much. Like, I'm from an era too where we just knew how to get places. Like, people today don't know how to get places. They can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we rely on people like you today because if something happens, then we're just back to hunter-gatherer states.
Yeah. Which, I mean, which there is a lot of dangers, not dangers, but there's a lot of
That's a bit.
potential
Yeah.
for that happening. There's a few different scenarios that could potentially make that a reality, right? I mean, what is your view on that? What are those challenges?
Well, I think when it comes to losing our infrastructure and our grid, the biggest threat that we can't do anything about is coronal mass ejection. So like the sun, high energy plasma, it hits our planet on a fairly regular basis, but the size of these coronal mass ejections kind of determines how bad it affects us. Like we've recently had a solar maximum where we've been able to see the northern lights at lower and lower altitude
Yeah. I
latitude.
remember.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, that's because we're getting hit with this high energy plasma. Well, our Earth's magnetic field does a really good job of protecting us. That's kind of the only reason why we're able to withstand this stuff. We have a magnetic field that helps. Now, if these coronal mass ejections are big enough and powerful enough, it actually excites particles in the atmosphere. And our power grid is a bunch of wires, which is a massive antenna, and it'll actually collect all this energy, and that energy goes into transformers that run our power plants, and it'll blow out those transformers. That's what it's not really the actual like grid, like the power lines, like they'll have damage, but it's all those transformers that get blown out. The problem with those transformers is they're massive. They cost like $1 million each, and they take like a year to build. And we don't have to just lay it around, right? So you lose one, someone's got to make one. So now if you have no power, how are you going to make a transformer, right? So that's like the biggest threat to the planet, because if the coronal mass ejection is big enough and long enough and powerful enough, it could wipe out the power grid for the entire planet. So that knocks us all back to the Stone Age. And there is historical precedent for it. In 1859, what's called the Carrington event. And that, back then, we basically had telegraph wires and a telegraph system. That's the only reason we know this event happens, is because the coronal mass ejection hit. The telegraph cables got electrified. A lot of people got burned. I think a few people even died. And some telegraph operators in some areas were able to send telegraphs without any external power, because there's so much energized power in the system. And it basically sorted out a lot of it as well. So had that happened today, we would have lost power grid. Power grid would have been gone. And it would have been taken a long time to come back, because we got to now figure out how to build replace all the transformers that are now destroyed. We got to figure out how to do that without electricity to begin with. And we need the electricity to do that.
And I remember hearing about that. Wasn't that in Canada, actually? The 1859 one?
There was another one in Canada. The Carrington event, I believe, was kind of, I think, if I remember correctly, it was like a lot of the Northern Hemisphere. The one in Canada was a smaller coronal mass ejection I can't remember the time. It wasn't that long ago, within the last 40 or 50 years. I believe it was the 80s, actually. And what had happened was it damaged some of the power grid, and that shut it down for quite a while. But that was a localized, basically. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but it did shut down power for quite a while. For a lot.
And it's
So do you think that due to the event that happened recently with the Northern Lights, do you think that we are more exposed now than we have been before?
Well, we're always exposed. That I think the sun we don't really understand the sun as much as we like to think we do. We can predict these types of things, and this kind of solar maximum we're into is definitely quite energetic, because we're seeing the northern lights get lower. That's kind of like a thing that we can look at to see how well or how energetic that things are getting. And it could be a sign of things to come, but these coronal mass ejections get ejected all the time. It's just, but if you think about how big space is and then where we are in space, we actually have to get hit by it. So it's almost like a game of Russian roulette, where the sun's just firing these things out, and one day we're going to be in the path of the big one. Or it could be 1,000 years from now, right? It could be 100 years from now. It could be tomorrow, or it could be like 1,000 years from now. Like it could be 1,000,000 years from now. Like it's really a game of odds. It is pretty much 100% guaranteed possibility we are eventually going to get hit by one of these things.
But it's also,
Well, if that ends, the only way we can prevent any damage is if the governments got together and actually did something to harden our grid. But that's not really a politically sexy thing for them to do, right?
No.
No one's getting elected on protecting the power grid, right? That's just not something the average person cares enough about, right? But it is something that is definitely possible to do. It just requires a few $1 billion to do it, which I mean,
Tell
we
us
know
about how could
governments
that be
spend that,
done?
like,
Yeah.
How could that be done? How could you make, because what happens during these, isn't it also called solar flares?
it's a solar storm. The solar
Oh.
flares is different. They kind of coincide a bit, but
Okay.
the solar flares are a different event.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a solar storm basically.
And what happens is that the technology that we have becomes super conductive or something. Something happens so that it just really makes it conductive and everything kind of blows up. Is that the right way?
Basically, our power grid basically will end up collecting all this energy, and then there'll be too much of it for the transformers to handle.
Yeah.
And it'll blow up the transformers.
Yeah.
Which is kind of exactly what they're supposed to do, so that they don't like continue to pump power through the grid, right? It's basically they're doing their job, but by kind of blowing out. But what all you really need to do is have a way to protect the actual transformer, and there are technologies available. I believe it was presented to Congress a while ago. I can't remember exactly what the technology was, but it was something that you put in to these systems, and it'd be almost like a fail-safe where if this bad stuff happened, it would like basically it would fail first, and it would cut off the transformer, so you don't blow those infrastructure out, right? But I believe at the time it cost about the same amount of money as a stealth bomber. It was like $1 billion or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the price is higher now, but if you look at, say, the United States, it's a drop in the bucket compared to their budget. Like it's like a few $1 billion nowadays is like, I remember back in the days when you said $1 billion, it was like a big deal. Now it's not, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the cost of the bridge here in Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I think our last bridge was a couple of $1 billion. Like it seems like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really not.
For sure.
So are there any political actions or preparations going on to prevent sort of these things?
Not that I see, no. No, it comes up every once in a while. I do see it come up in like, I'll see it in the news and something. Someone will talk about it, but it never gets past there. It's just not something that, like, I don't think a lot of politicians want to put their name behind it. Like, it just doesn't seem to be like something that they care enough about. I think I have heard some stuff with it around. Remember when Texas had the ice storms and their power grid went down?
Mm-hmm.
I did hear some stuff after that where they're talking about, oh, we need to like harden the grid and stuff, but I don't think anything ever became of it.
Okay, so it's not because they're ignorant, more because they don't care.
Yeah, it's also like, I don't think they want to go through the effort and the money spending, and then because it's a lot of money to spend to really, it's not something you can physically see.
Mm-hmm.
Like if a government builds a bridge, you can see the bridge. If you harden your grid, everything kind of is the same. And then there's also probably like, I'm sure there's a lot of issues with the individual power companies.
Oh yeah.
Like you'd have to coordinate with all of them. Like I don't really see like anyone trying to do anything about it. Like even here locally in Canada, I don't think I've ever heard anyone suggest that our hydroelectric company here hardened the grid.
Crazy.
I want to take a quick break to acknowledge one of our sponsors, Swedish Cold. This thing that I'm sitting in right here is the most amazing spaceship I've ever seen. Swedish Cold doesn't just produce ice baths. They produce the most revolutionary cold exposure experience that's out there. Not only is it stylish, but the running costs are low. The water freezes fast, and the water temperature remains at 0 degrees Celsius all year long. So whether you're a health-conscious individual like me, a gym owner, or you run a facility, then this state-of-the-art ice bath would be a perfect match for you. For me, this is one of my favorite habits. Not only does it boost my testosterone and my dopamine, it also elevates my core temperature and it helps me manage my stress levels. With Swedish Cold, you're not only investing in a piece of equipment, you're investing in your future. So head over to swedishcold.com and remember to use the code HOLISTIC10 to save 10% off your next ice bath.
But then take us through, if a solar storm like in the 1800s, the same as 1859, was to hit today, with the amount of technology that we have today, what would it look like in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, it would be probably the don't want to say the better option, but those say, because there's other things that go wrong as well. So the solar storm hits, it's like a long wave electromagnetic pulse, basically. So it'll affect the power grid, it'll wipe out our power production capacity until it can get fixed. Our cell phones, complex electronics, probably even vehicles will most likely be fine. You might see some damages if you have like radio equipment set up with long antennas, but for the most part, complex electronics will weather the storm. So you'll have all your radios, computers, things like that. If you have a solar power system set up in your house, that'll be functional. Like most of that stuff should be okay after just a solar storm. But satellites will most definitely be affected. NASA does have ways to protect their satellites from solar storms because this happens on a fairly regular basis. And when you're in space, you're less protected. So they do have ways to protect. So you'll probably see a lot of satellites damaged, but I think for the most part, NASA will be on board or figuring it out pretty good, and they'll protect a lot of this. You might still have GPS, you might still have some communications, but we'll have no power grid. So without power, there will be a period of time initially where no one is going to have any idea what's going on. Right? Because when your power's gone, your cell network's probably gone, your internet's probably down, phone systems are probably down. Like it's just, you're going to get knocked down to the Stone Age.
TV is down.
So yeah, TV's down. So you have no real way to get information. So as far as most people are going to be concerned, it's going to be a massive power outage. And until more information comes in, and which is going to be hard to get for a lot of people, you're not really going to understand the full scope of the disaster. So there's actually going to be like a period of time, probably within the first day, that if you're self-reliant, you're prepared, you're ready to go, and you have some means set aside, like say you're an amateur radio operator, you've got like even just a shortwave radio, and you can gather information from elsewhere, you'll know that it's a coronal mass ejection before anyone else will, and then you can basically be ready for what happens next, which is as soon as people realize the power is not coming back on, then there's going to be panic. That's when you're going to see the runs on the stores. That's when you see people try to get out of town. People are going to probably just flee the cities because we've all seen the movies where disaster strikes and everything goes to chaos, right? So you're going to see highways packed, jam-packed. People are going to be just running away just for the sake of doing that.
Yeah.
And again, if you're prepared and you're ready to go and you understand what's going to happen, then you're more in a position to calmly go through what's happening. Couple of big things that are going to happen is no refrigeration. So your refrigeration's down, a lot of food's going to spoil. You also transportation, a lot of transportation. I mean, it's just a truck, but that truck relies on a lot of like digital and electronic communications to just get from point A to point B to deliver goods. So we don't really have a system in place to go fully analog with that. And especially if there's no communications, like you can't get food from a warehouse somewhere to the stores if you can't call them, right? There's not really going to be a way to do that. And once people figure out where the warehouses are, those are going to be looted almost immediately as well. You would suspect more often than not, you're going to see criminal elements get in there and loot those stores or just take more. This, if I was an unscrupulous individual and I had a gang of guys, that's exactly what I would do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go to one of those, roll in there, take it over.
Yeah, because then
Survival of the
it's
strongest.
back to tribal mentality in a way, you know?
Yeah.
Like you will have to, that's the power. It's no longer money. You can't even pay. Like all of currency will be down as well because a whole grid of paying and card and stuff, it's also not going to work. So you can't exchange for food either.
Yeah.
I think initially in the first day or so, people will still exchange money, like cash.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the second any people realize the power is not coming back on,
Yep.
and then that money is now worthless because the money is backed by the central bank and the government.
Uh-huh.
That, like, I think most of us do realize that, like, a $5 bill is not worth $5.
Mm.
There's no government backing it up saying, oh yeah, by the way, this is worth $5.
Yeah.
So it's going to be gold, silver, precious metals, barter system, and skills. Skills is going to be a big one. If you have skills, if you have like even just basic construction, basic survival skills. If you're like an amateur radio operator, you can basically name your price for getting people information or trying to send information somewhere. Like there's going to be a lot of things like that where skills will be a massive way for you to survive. It's just to market those skills out there to people, and they'll give you, like, a lot of people will give you a lot of stuff just so that you can do the things for them that they can't do. And then even things like alcohol, that's going to be a big one that a lot of people drink a lot and they are going to need it. And if you have this little, one of my articles about bartering, I suggest keeping some bottles of booze just for barter purposes.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of underhanded. It's kind of like a bit of a scumbag move to like prey on an alcoholic with a bottle of vodka and say, yeah, I'll trade this for whatever. But it's a grid down survival situation. And like at the end of the day, like you got to do what you got to do. Like the only people you have to care about are your family and maybe people immediately around you. And that's about it.
So we're talking about complete disruption. And I saw that there was an estimate that you mentioned that in coincidence this would happen, 9 out of 10 people would die within what?
Yeah.
Whoa.
A year.
Yeah, that's the
really?
official estimate. Within a year, 90% of people would be dead.
Yeah, 90. That's the for a coronal mass ejection or electromagnetic pulse. Yes, the estimate is within a year, 90% of the population will be dead. And it's what it really comes down to is like we just like the food is a big one. Like our food, like if you go through the grocery store, and look at where the food's coming from, a lot of it's not coming locally.
Yeah.
And I mean, locally here we have some decent amount of farmland, but it can't support the 2 or 3 million people who live around here.
Yeah.
So it eventually, like within about a year, 90% of people are going to be dead, and it's only going to be the strongest that are going to be surviving. And it's probably going to, it may not even be so much the prepared people that survive. It's the people who are willing to do the things that they need to do to basically survive.
The dirty tricks.
You basically just have to be like being prepared is the best inoculation for this, but you also have to be like prepared to like every single day get up and be just getting after it, trying to survive the next day. It's going to be a day by day thing after a grid down scenario.
So what you say is that you have to have a weapon.
Yeah. Weapons are a tricky one because like I don't own firearms. I'm not a gun guy.
Oh, really?
I'm not. Canada too has just the most draconian gun laws ever. So it's not even really it's almost not even worth the effort. I am a hunter, a traditional bow hunter. So I have a bow, things like that, right? So, weapons are a tricky one because it's like, say if someone had a firearm for defense, unless they practice and train with it regularly, it's completely useless. Like you really need to actually get training. Without training, firearms are almost more of a danger to yourself than they are to the people who are attacking you. I do suggest, like, I think people need to practice martial arts. That's a big one for if you want defense after like a grid down scenario. Martial arts is probably one of the bigger ones. I practice jujitsu, kickboxing, a little bit of Muay Thai. And the reason is when you're interacting with people in a stressful situation like a grid down collapse, if you are afraid of someone attacking you, you are going to be on the defensive all the time. And your odds of getting into a violent altercation are just skyrocket. If you're not afraid of someone attacking you because you've got some abilities and skills, your ability to now not have that escalate is way, way higher. You're going to be way more calm, and your calmness will calm the other person down, right? So when you're interacting with people and they're afraid, but you're not, your lack of fear and your calmness is going to translate into them, and they're going to feel more at ease. If you're both really afraid that this situation is going to turn violent, it's probably going to turn violent. And having like a background in martial arts is should be a number one on survivalist list of things to do, is to learn and to be in a mindset in a grid down scenario where you are going to be able to be always calm and never afraid that you're going to get like attacked by people, because you know how to handle yourself, right? If I'm encountering a guy and I'm trying to negotiate something for, I don't know, I'm going to give him something, we're going to do a barter. And if I go in there and I'm like, oh man, he's going to attack me and I'm going to take my stuff, yeah, we're probably going to get to a fight. If I'm going in there being, okay, well, fine. If he attacks me, I'm just going to, do this defense and I'm going to take him down and I'm not going to hurt him. Like, which is basically my attitude is if I was in a situation like that, I'd be like, no, I'm just going to, the guy throws a punch, I'm going to grab it and I'm going to take him to the ground and I'm going to say, hey, calm down. We're fine. Like, I'm not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And that attitude and that mindset I have is just, I even in that kind of situation, it's just like,
makes you more calm.
I'm not going to be afraid. Like, I'm not going to be like escalating situations. And I'm also not going to be doing that because I understand the consequences of all these actions. And I think my military experience also shows that, or does that too. Because the second you introduce a knife or a firearm, and it's the second you have to use it, there's an aftermath beyond that people don't really understand. Like, if you're walking around, you have a gun, or if you have a knife, suddenly every situation you encounter is now you're thinking, I'm going to solve it with my gun or my knife.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you do solve it with the gun and a knife, now there's an aftermath beyond that people don't really understand to think about. Again, it's Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
You get into a massive shootout and then everything's fine, but it's not, because the person you just shot's got a family, or maybe you shot him, now he's wounded. Now what are you gonna do, right? Like, you've got a wounded guy there that you were responsible for. Now what, right? Like, it's all well and good to watch the movies where they just come up and shoot the guy again. Like, well, we're all human beings, right? We can't be doing that. So yeah, like firearms and stuff. If someone's trained, sure. If they really think they need them, okay, fine, whatever. I'm not a gun guy. I think avoidance is the best for avoiding like bad stuff.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if someone's coming at your house and they're going to try to take your stuff, they're going to have more people, and having a massive shootout is only going to get a lot of people hurt, probably you hurt. It is just better to let them have it. Like, you've got the greater numbers with the greater guns, they're just going to win. Like, we're not, like, we have to always think about the next day. And the next day with half your family members wounded is a really crappy situation, but having the next day, we're all alive and well, but you lost half your stuff. I would take that any day of the week. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, I don't really advocate for guns or weapons, because it's just, it's just not a.
I want to take a quick break to acknowledge one of our sponsors, Bahay. As you know, I'm a major advocate of the benefits that nature brings us, and I ground myself daily to decrease inflammation and maximize my longevity. I ground myself daily by being barefoot on the grass. But being barefoot isn't always possible. So instead of using synthetically soled shoes that block our connection with Earth, I use these. Bahay have created the world's first running shoe that allows you to be grounded when going barefoot isn't practical. This means that the shoe has been designed with a sole that allows you to absorb all the negative ions from Earth just as if you were barefoot. And the bonus, its base is wide so it can fit all your toes without compressing them. Bahay offer a range of both barefoot style shoes and cushioned shoes. So head over to bahay.co and check out their full range. And remember to use the code HOLISTIC10 to save 10% off your next order.
It's a good point, for sure. And it's actually funny because here in Denmark, I believe it's 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Prime Minister came up with a warning that we might be under attack from Russia. So they are advising people to prepare for 3 days of a power outage. For whatever reason. Might be propaganda, might be real, no one knows really. Do you know why 3 days?
3 days is usually the standard when government or emergency preparedness agencies, pretty much worldwide, is always they have a 72-hour scenario where they think a disaster happens and they believe that within 72 hours, the government will be able to help the population.
Okay.
In a lot of cases, that is kind of true. There have been cases in the past, like Hurricane Katrina, where there was a hurricane rolled through, and it was definitely more than 72 hours for a lot of people. But that's something even here in Canada. Where I live in an earthquake zone, and our government says the same thing: 72 hours. Be ready for 3 days alone, even though if a massive earthquake hit, it would probably be more like 2 weeks before we saw the government come in and help us. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of where Denmark is on the map.
Denmark is Scandinavia, so we are Northern Europe, right?
Right next to Germany.
Yeah, Northern Europe.
Yeah, just above Germany.
Oh, okay, so but you don't share a border with Russia, do you?
Yeah.
No, we don't.
Bornholm. So kind of, yes.
Because Kaliningrad's in that area, isn't it?
Which one?
Kaliningrad. There's a little Russian territory, Kaliningrad.
Might be, but Russia is just right to Denmark.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I don't know if we directly share a border, but it's kind of close, yes.
Yeah.
There's also the oil. There was the oil thing that
the oil pipe.
The oil pipes that was exploded. That was in Denmark. That was in Danish water.
Yeah.
So
there is a little thing going on with Russia all the time. But again, you know, Denmark is such a small, insignificant country. So for me, it's just difficult to believe why would Russia have any interest in doing harm to Denmark. So that's just my, you know.
But still, though, you have to be. So when you prepare, what have you done in your own house and stuff to be able to? Because we just talked about food is going to be the main thing. 9 out of 10 people are going to die because they don't have food. So I guess production of food is going to be very important. We've seen it. Once it gets cold and really cold, there's nothing in nature. You can't just go out and find some berries and fish and stuff like that. Yeah. So food production becomes very important, right? Let's get into that. How do we prepare?
Well, the number one thing I worry about is water, always. Because you can only last 3 days without water. The problem with water is it's heavy. It takes up a lot of space. So my goal is about 2 weeks worth of water stored on hand, ready to go. And then I have filters and backup filters, and then backups of those backup filters. I have a lot of water filters. I would also boil water. I have access to water not too far away, relatively cleanish water. So that I've got kind of handled, but I do have 2 weeks of stored water on hand. And then for food, it's not really, I don't really have the space to store like a year's worth of food. So what we basically do is have a rotational system where we always have about 2 to 3 weeks of food in the house, and then we're just kind of rotating through that food. So at any given time, if a disaster struck, we'd be good for a month and a half, maybe even 2 months of rationing. Beyond that, my goal would be wildlife around me. We don't live in a super rural area, but we have enough bunnies, rabbits, raccoons, animals like that, that for the first while, like I would, after a grid down scenario or even an earthquake or disaster or something like that, immediately, like that day, I'm going to be trapping animals. I'm going to be trying to gather up protein from the wilderness. That's not really wilderness, the green belts around my area. And I'm going to be trying to get out to do some fishing and stuff like that too. And I want to gather that protein before anyone else realizes that it's a serious situation, and then they start doing it as well. I want to be the first. So,
yeah, because my thought is that you can always find your food in nature, right? So why preserve food?
well, you can find some food in nature. Especially like in the winter months, it's really a lot more difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
You can still find protein sources in even the winter months. Like I've caught tons of fish in the winter. We have enough areas around here I can fish. There's enough animals around. We could definitely make a go at it. The problem is there's also a lot of other people who are going to want to do the same things. And then when you have an area that has like 2 or 3 million people in it, and then now everyone's trying to look for food, you can suddenly start finding that there's a lot of competition for it. And then the actual like plant life, and like having a backyard garden is great. We grow a little bit of food ourselves in the backyard garden, but you need quite a bit of space to actually grow enough food to sustain yourself and your family. Like we have enough where we can go out, pick some lettuce and got a few other things, but it's not enough to live off of. We still have to supplement with stuff in the store. So like the non-perishables like rice and flour, things like that, we have a fairly decent stock of. But again, it's like a space thing where having even 2 or 3 weeks worth of food on hand, like it's still a lot of space. Like you fill up the storage room pretty good, and the pantry's pretty full of stocks.
Yeah, and you're exposed if you have a garden.
Yeah, you are a bit too. Yeah, and even if a garden, it's still like we need protein.
Yeah.
Like, it's like we really need protein. Like especially in a grid down situation where you're going to be out there like working. Like it's dawn to dusk, like every day you're going to be out there trying to survive. Like there's no days off, and you're going to be burning a lot of calories, and you're going to be working, and your muscles are going to need protein to build back up. And yeah, that's where it really comes down to. And with like when we're talking about grid down scenario, like when we lose power, you lose refrigeration. So that's why having like a solar power system or even battery backups, like there's a whole bunch of products out there. Having the ability to keep your fridge and freezer running till you exhaust everything in them is pretty important. And I've got, I have what's in the book. We have how to build a solar power system, and I have that in my shed right now with the panels ready to go, so I can plug my fridge and stuff into that. But I also have some commercially made portable power stations, and I have several of them that I've reviewed over the years, and I use those will power my fridge, my freezer. So for realistically, you're probably looking at about a week, maybe, that you would need to keep those things cold.
Yeah.
Like my freezer, I've got a decent amount of food in there, but within about a week and a half, it's going to be gone. Like we're going to, like, if you can't go to the store and restock it, it's going to be gone. So you only really need to keep that stuff cold for, I would say maximum 2 weeks. And then now you have all that power available for other things. But
okay, so
but yeah,
yeah, so So how would you go
Okay.
about electricity while we're at that topic? Would you go as far as to say you need to build your own solar panels, or would you just prepare to buy a generator, or what would you do?
Well, the cheaper option is a generator.
Yeah.
I have a generator. I bought that after a power outage we had here many years ago. But they are loud and they draw a lot of attention. So I don't really like generators because, and then also the fuel. You have to know how much fuel your generator takes. Like my generator has because at a full tank, it'll run for 9 hours. And I think that one jerry can gives me 2 tanks of gas. So if I start doing the math and how much fuel I keep on hand just to keep myself cool, that's a lot of fuel. It's a lot of noise. So solar power systems are better. They are more expensive. But we have it in the book how to build one. You can what I show in the book is probably the cheapest way you can possibly do it. We just use marine deep cycle batteries that you get at your locals, any place that sells marine batteries. And we have those plus a charge controller and an inverter and then solar panels. And in the book, I believe I'm talking about using 600 watts of solar panels, 6 batteries, and then an inverter and a charge controller. And that'll run a fridge all day, like without a problem. And then if you have the panels in the sunlight, they'll continue to charge the batteries, and you should be able to run a fridge pretty much indefinitely, as long as you got good sunlight. And that's probably the best option for a lot of people. It'd be the cheapest option, and it at least gets you something to where you can actually save up money and then maybe buy some of the more commercially made products that have like lithium batteries.
Yeah.
Like I've got a bunch of them from Blue Eddy that I've reviewed, and they're pretty good. They're well built. They run off of lithium iron phosphate batteries, which are very safe chemistry, and they have all the plugs in them. You can charge devices. You can plug in their solar panels or any solar panels, and those are a lot smaller. And that's the only reason why I even mention them is because having 6 or 8 or 12 or whatever deep cycle marine batteries, it's heavy, it's big, and it requires a lot of space. But if you use lithium batteries or lithium iron phosphate batteries, it's a lot smaller package. Plus, you can discharge them a lot lower. You can use more of the battery before you have to charge it, which gives you more bang for your buck, but it's still significantly more expensive. So I recommend that everybody have some type of solar power system set up just for their fridges and freezer. Like I have it in the book how to even calculate it out. Figuring out how many watt hours your fridge and the freezers use that number to figure out how many batteries you need, and then how much solar panels you need to charge the batteries. And doing that allows you to at least not have to worry about refrigeration, because that's going to be like what's in your fridge and what's in your freezer. Like if you're like me, I've got a garage fridge and a freezer in my garage. So that's 3 devices full of food that if it went bad, that's like a lot of food. That's a lot of that's a lot of food you can afford to lose, right?
Yeah.
So having the power available to you so that you can actually continue to run those, that's kind of essential.
Yeah.
And again, the book, we describe exactly how to do that. And from that too, you can, if you decided to go with lithium batteries, it doesn't take much more research past that to figure out what kind of charge controllers you need and inverters you need. But all the basic information is there. All you need to do basically is take a look at it, look at what you can afford, and just put it together.
Yeah.
But let's say a power outage occurred, or for whatever reason, solar flares, whatever. What about cars? I know about electric vehicles; they would be fucked. But what about regular cars, gas-driven cars?
Well, for the most part, if it was a coronal mass ejection, your car should be fine, because the car doesn't have enough electronics in it where it would collect enough of a charge, and it's kind of shielded from the metal of the car. An electromagnetic pulse set off by like a high altitude nuclear detonation, that would be a different story. There is some evidence to suggest that your car would be fine, but there's also evidence to suggest that all vehicles would be, the computer electronics inside would be wiped out.
Okay.
I'm more inclined to believe that if you have a vehicle that has any kind of electronic systems inside of it that are essential for the car to run, that is probably going to get wiped out by an electromagnetic pulse.
Yeah.
So that's the high altitude nuclear detonation. A coronal mass ejection, on the other hand, is a very low frequency pulse, basically. And so
it depends.
your car should shield it from that. But again, an electromagnetic pulse from a nuclear weapon, I think definitely most modern vehicles are going to be completely taken out. And the reason is, like, I've messed around with vehicles before doing mechanics and stuff on it. And the amount of times that I've screwed something up by not plugging the right thing in, and then it doesn't work. Like they're so finicky with all the sensors and all there's so many things inside of a modern vehicle that have to work right in order for the car to even start.
Satellites too.
Yeah, exactly. And if you lose any of that system, it's gone. Like so I think most vehicles will probably not work.
So
vehicles
Go ahead.
produce like really old vehicles with like carburetors and stuff, don't have like electronic fuel ignition or fuel injection. They'll probably be okay. They might require a little bit of tweaking.
So does it even matter to store fuel?
Yeah, and then exactly. So your vehicles don't count on having a car after in a grid down scenario, unless it's like a coronal mass ejection, or the grid goes down for another reason, or other reasons the grid can go down as well.
Now, to me, does it even sound realistic to try and stay in your own house and make a refrigerator at home? And you know what I mean? I mean, it sounds so ridiculously crazy. Like that, for instance, let's say your area. You live in an area where 3 million people live, and they're all going to go and hunt for food. Now, are they just going to be nice to each other and stay in their own garden? Or would it be, let's say this happened and things are going completely bananas. Would you try to stay in your house, or would you take your family and start moving with the knowledge you have of maps and stuff? What would be the best decision?
It kind of depends on the area you live in. I would say if you lived in like the heart of the city, and you like live in high rises, and you live in like a downtown core, I think staying there would be a big mistake. Like there's nothing there for anyone, and most people are going to flee those areas anyways. If you live in the suburbs, you have a house, or even like a townhouse, something like that, and you have some area to like store things and prepare to be able to hunker down for a bit, I think staying put is usually the best idea, but you need to be ready to go, like at a moment's notice, because there's so many things that could happen. And especially now that we have no infrastructure, no first responders, like even something as simple as a fire kicks off somewhere. Now no one's there to put it out, right? So you need to be ready to go immediately. And then when you go, you got to be ready to basically just leave. The idea of going off into the woods to survive sounds great on paper, but unless you know the area you're going to, like very, very well, and you're sure that no one else is going to be there, like it's going to be difficult to survive. Like when you have to hunt and gather your own food, it becomes very problematic because, like, say if like my family with our dog go off into the woods and try to survive. Like realistically, even if every one of us was out there hunting and gathering, it's going to be very difficult to gather enough food to maintain the calorie expenditure of going out hunting and gathering. Human beings have always lived from, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago. We've always lived in small groups, but we've always lived in groups of about like 30 to 100 people. And the reason is that's a good sized group to have people go out and hunt. Then you have people go out and gather, get people back looking after the kids and maintaining the camp or village. And it works that way because you need all those people out there gathering resources and bringing them in. And it works well because when you have a lot of people specialize in different tasks. They can all bring resources in. Everyone shares resources, and you have basically just enough. If you now are in a small family group where it's like, 4 or 5 people, to do that kind of specialization now, again, it's going to be a lot harder for the hunters to go out and kill the deer when there's 2 of them versus when there's 20. There's like 20 guys out there looking for deer. Now you got 10 groups of 2, your odds of getting one are much greater.
Yeah.
And then now you bring that one animal back, you're feeding the whole village.
Yeah.
Whereas now you have, 2 guys go out, maybe they get one, maybe they don't. And then they get one, they bring it back. You had better know how to preserve food because now you have way too much food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the people who are gathering too, like, you gotta know how to like turn your berries into pemmican. Like, there's a lot of things that you need to know. So the idea of going out into the woods and surviving, it sounds good. If you have all the knowledge and the skills, you're better off, but it's a really, really, really hard thing to do. If anyone wants to know how hard it is for people to do, you watch a TV show Alone, where they send survivalists out with 10 items and send 10 survivalists out with 10 items each, that they choose. They go out into the woods and they try to survive alone, self-filming everything. And last person who doesn't tap out, last person remaining wins $500,000.
Yeah, we have that.
We have seen that program, yes.
Yeah. And all of these people end up basically at the end of the day is who can starve the longest.
Yeah.
Because no one gets enough food. No one gets it's such a hard thing. And these are people who are like really excited to do this and really they learn about it, practice, and they have a hard time of it and a really hard time of it. So it's leaving. Now, that being said though, if you have like a cabin or something
by a
out
lake,
in the woods, by a lake, and then the area, you've got like some food set aside there and some equipment and stuff. That could be like a bug out location. Then absolutely. If the bad stuff happens, you gather up everything you possibly can and you run there and you hide there, because that would be your best bet, because you have a spot that you know about, that you understand the area, especially if you were hunting and fishing it and you knew how to do anything. It's like there's areas around here, like there's creeks and streams not too far from here that any time of day, I can go there and I can catch fish. Like I've fished them for 25, 30 years. So I can just go and no problem. Like I know exactly where they're hiding all the time. So if you have an area like that where this is my lake, the fish are always here at this time, fish are always here at that time, or the deer are always around this area, or there's like, I don't know, there's bunnies that come through here, and there's grouse over here. Like, if you know the area, absolutely. Yeah. And you have like a cabin and you have some supplies there, then absolutely bug out there, because it'll be a lot better to ride out any kind of storm that way than it would be staying put in your house. Even in the suburbs here, like it's going to be rough to survive a grid down scenario, but it's better than going off into the woods without a place to go.
In terms of water, I think the easiest way would be to try and utilize rainwater. How would you go about that? Because you cannot, I don't know, can you just drink plain rainwater?
So rainwater, you can gather up rainwater. Rainwater is actually not as clean as people think it is.
No.
It still needs to be filtered. But if you have a water filter, it's no problem.
And how would you go about that? A water filter?
Well, we do have a water filter described in the book, which is like 3 buckets full of sand and gravel and charcoal and stuff. And that works. I would suggest getting actually buying a filter, because the filters that you buy filter down to a much smaller. Trying to think of the word here. Some of the filters I have filter down to like microns.
Okay.
So they're filtering out all the bacteria. But even with those filters, they don't filter viruses. But for rainwater, if you gather up your rainwater, the way we show in the books to collect rainwater is 3 barrels stacked on top of each other. and then you collect it from your gutters, and then it fills up these barrels, and then you have all this rainwater available. They're 55-gallon drums, so I mean they don't get totally full, so you're probably like 150 gallons of water. The thing with collecting rainwater that way is now it's hitting your roof, it's going into gutters. I don't know about where you guys are, but my gutters are always gross. Like they're full of slime and just they're full of just nasty stuff. So all that now goes into these bin or these barrels and basically sits there.
Yeah.
So you get bacterial growth and things like that, right? So that's where you take the water, you run it through a filter. Sawyer makes a filter. It's like a small spoke that big. It filters down to, I think it's like a micron or something. It's very small. It'll filter out all the bacteria. But what I would do is I would build a filter like we described in the book, run all the water through that, collect that water, and then I would boil that water.
Okay.
And the reason being is I want to save my actual filters for going to like actual water sources and pumping out water. And if you filter your water through the filter we described in the book, you're filtering out all the big stuff. You're getting through and you're basically filtering it to it's pretty close. You can probably drink it. I would always suggest boiling it afterwards. So all you got to do is hit rolling boil once and that's it. The notion of we have to boil water for 5 minutes is kind of false unless you're at high altitudes. If you're even remotely around sea level, you boil as soon as it hits a rolling boil, everything's dead. Like all the viruses, bacteria, everything's dead in there, and it's safe to drink. So with water, and when you're collecting rainwater and you're filtering and you're boiling it, what you really just need is you need a way to boil it, and you need a reliable way to boil it. So it could be as simple as a fire pit in your backyard. It could be like a stove that you build. We do have a wood stove that I show in the
and that brings us to how to make fire, right? So
a lot of people don't know how to make fire.
Do you need to do the old school way with the rocks, or would you just buy lighter gas, or what would you do?
I would have I still make fire starting things at home. The way I like to do fire usually is with a ferrocerium rod. It's like it's a rod. I'm not sure exactly what it's actually made out of, but you run a vacuum knife over it and it shoots sparks, and they're very, very hot sparks. And they're quite dramatic sparks. So you can do that onto a fire starter and then you can get a fire that way. But just having a bunch of big lighters laying around, having a bunch of matches, having like, they have these plasma lighters. They recharge off of batteries and stuff, but if you have power, you can charge them up, right? I have one that we use for candles. It's like this little plasma lighter you use for a candle, but it's great for lighting anything with fire. And it runs off of USB. So if you have your portable power, solar backup power, and you have all this surplus power, you might as well use it, right? Because when it comes to like lighting fires and doing things like that, I always think use the easy stuff first. Like, don't make it hard on yourself right away. Like, if you have a bunch of big lighters laying around, use those and light all your fires. And then when they run out, then switch to your next method. Maybe it's matches or whatever, and then switch to your ferrocerium rods. Or if you have like these plasma lighters that will basically go forever as long as you have power, you might well use them. Like, making it difficult on ourselves for lighting fires and stuff like that. It's good to have the skills to do it the old school primitive ways, but you should never rely on that. Like, it's like, I know how to do a bow drill fire, and I have done it before. It's so hard. And especially in the area I live in, it's like Northwest, the wood's always so wet. Like, it's really difficult to do. So I never want to rely on that. I know how to do it, to give me enough time. I can sit down and because with stuff like that, you gotta be very precise. You gotta, when you're carving up the notches and your, fireboards and stuff, everything's gotta be pretty precise. You've gotta like really choose the right wood. Everything's gotta be just right in order to make it happen. So you don't really want to rely on that. because if you're sitting there all day frustrated trying to set a fire, burning calories that you don't have to replenish,
Yeah.
when you could have just used a lighter or a match. Like, it's
Exactly.
just,
Yeah.
yeah. And then with things like fire too, it's always best just to try to keep it smoldering.
Mhm.
Like, try to let it go out. Like,
Yeah.
just, if you're gonna start relying on that, just always have a little bit of fire going. Just like, unless, of course, you have your access to firewood is limited, then
Mhm.
Yeah. We
don't do
kind of
that.
know
But
a
if you
little
have
bit
an
about
abundance
that
of
too.
firewood around you,
Yeah.
We did our own little survival thing this winter,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. We tried.
we decided, okay, we're just gonna because we were gonna do full survival. So we thought, okay, we just do a big fire in the evening, and then it'll keep going the whole night. So we made like a
A
huge one,
tower.
and we
Yeah.
woke up in the middle of the night, and the whole thing almost burned down, our whole tent and everything. So it's important to like, yeah, how do you even do that? How do you keep a fire going?
Yeah. Something as basic as that.
Yeah, how do you keep a fire going without it making it too big? And how do you make that?
well, there's a couple ways. The number one thing I always think about with fires is when you gather up your firewood, right? So you can say you wanted to have your fire going all day or all night, whatever. So gather up your firewood. You put whatever you think is enough firewood. You put that in a pile, and then immediately go out and double that.
Yeah,
Because you are always going to burn more wood than you think. Always. It's never like I'm always astonished at how fast sometimes I can go
it
through
goes
wood.
away. Yeah,
There is a way though. What you can do is you build a fire, and then you have basically it's like a V that comes up. Basically build like it's kind of like two ramps, and then on those ramps you basically stacking up logs.
Mhm.
And what happens is the fire in the middle starts burning these logs, and then as they burn, the next ones roll in,
they roll
and the
in.
next one roll in,
Oh.
and it's called a self-feeding fire. It works pretty good. I think I have done an article about that. I believe I did a video on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it's a self-feeding fire. There's tons of stuff online on how to do it. It does work pretty good.
Yeah.
It works okay. But if you get a solid 8 hours of sleep, that's a long time for a fire.
Yeah.
So
That's a big ramp.
usually, like if you're trying to keep a fire going all night, you kind of have to, basically every couple of hours you're going to be waking up. For that, I think the best way to kind of wake up is when you get cold.
Yeah.
Like when you wake up because you're cold, then it's like, okay, now I need to put more wood on the fire.
Yeah.
Because your body will tell you, and you will wake up. Like if you start getting uncomfortable and you wake up and you're like, oh wow, it's getting cold. And you look over your fire. Okay, now I need to put more wood on it and build it back up. And that's usually the way to do it. There's other people have other ways of doing it. But that's one thing I've done in the past is you set up a fire and then you use it to warm yourself up in your lean-to or whatnot. And then, yeah, when you get cold, start throwing more wood in the fire.
Got
and
it.
just hope that you have enough, because the last thing you want to do is go out in the woods at night trying to find firewood.
Yeah. Or burn your whole tent down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, maybe the most important one is a first aid kit or medicine.
Yeah.
Medicine's a big one, because if you don't have access anymore to the pharmacy and you require medicine to survive, that's a big one. I think the biggest thing though is with that is to try to be as healthy as possible.
Yeah.
Like if you're a type of person who's got, like, say, type 2 diabetes and your doctor's saying, listen, you can get rid of this by exercising and getting in shape, then you should probably exercise and get in shape and get rid of that thing. Right. You should if there's things that you require basically to survive, you really need to figure out a way to maintain a supply of that. It's going to be really difficult for a lot of people. Like, say you were dependent on insulin. That is a huge one that you're kind of screwed in a screwed down scenario, because insulin requires refrigeration. And I don't know that if you went to your doctor and said, I'm afraid that the power grid's going to go down for a year and a year supply, that they would be willing to just hand that over to you.
Mm.
Like I don't.
No.
I'm not sure.
They
I
won't.
think that'd be a hard thing to do, but I think for the most part, if you were to explain to whatever doctor, whoever gives you prescriptions, that you wanted more of a supply because you don't say grid down because that sounds kind of weird, but it's like saying in case of an earthquake or in case of a natural disaster, I would like to have, I'm trying to be prepared of like the next month. That would probably be reasonable, but
That's a month.
medicine is going to be a big problem for a
Yeah.
lot of people.
Or learn how
And
to
some
make it.
people, it's just, there's nothing you can do about it, right? If you need it
No, but the
to live, you
basic
need it
stuff
to live.
like antibiotics and something like that, you can basically get from medicinal herbs, right? The basic stuff that you still need.
Antibiotics, there are lots of medicinal plants. It's good to have a knowledge of them.
Yeah.
But realistically, can you find them at the right time? You got to be an expert to do that, right?
You don't need to be so much an expert. I've got a ton of books here with very detailed drawings and descriptions of medicinal herbs in the area. But there's this, you're not going to get like in things like antibiotics. You really need an antibiotic. Like there's not a lot of stuff in nature that's going to do as good a job. The big thing is just avoid infection. This is number one.
Yeah. Just avoid. Yeah.
And that means like being super vigilant about every cut, every little scrape. It's got to get cleaned. Like it's like we have to like right now. If you get hurt or you get sick, you can go to the hospital.
Mm.
You now have to realize you can't do that. But like with having a first aid kit, you need a good first aid kit with a lot of good stuff. But you also have to realize that that is a very finite supply of stuff. Like you got to really think about every time you're doing something, you really now have to think about it. Like, okay, if I'm using my knife, I really now have to be like, I cannot cut myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I cut myself, I now have to use, I have to use 3 steri strips, which now I don't have. Now I have use some gauze. Well, that was now gauze I no longer have. I had to go like ointment. Now I have less of that, right? So every little thing, you need to save the first aid kit for all the emergencies that actually happen that you could not avoid. Everything that you can avoid, everything has to be careful. And we have to get off or get out of the mindset of, I'll just get help. Because no, you're not. It's going to be a serious issue. Anything that happens. And even things like getting sick. Keeping a stockpile of basic medications, like antihistamines, Imodium for if you get diarrhea, like things like that. Ibuprofen, Advil, like painkillers, things that bring fever down. Like that's what ibuprofen and ibuprofen and Tylenol, right, bring fevers down. Aspirin, all these like basic over-the-counter medications that you would go to if you got sick. You need to have like a pretty decent supply of them. And I think the best way to do that is always just to have kind of almost double what you have in your house, and then you rotate through them because they do expire. So as you use them, so as you use what you're using, you're rotating in your stock, you buy new bottles and keep it going because they do expire. And when medication expires, it gets less potent. So if you start using medicine that's like 5 years expired, like it'll probably still work, but you need more of it. And unless you know how to calculate that out, like it's just best to always keep going.
How about
but like with first aid kits though, you should always have a good first aid kit regardless of what we're doing. It doesn't have to be a grid down scenario. You should always have a really good, well thought out first aid kit in your house. Like it's always because there's going to be times when someone gets hurt and you have to wait for an ambulance. Like I have, or even when I'm out hunting, like my first aid kit's got a tourniquet in it, so that if I fall and for some reason I was being stupid and my broadhead goes into my leg, I can tourniquet it off, and then I'm now when I call my satellite device to get help, I'm not going to bleed out before that happens, right? And it's just good things to have, and we should all have those things, and we should have the training to use those things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so like even my vehicle, I have a first aid kit in the back, and it's got a tourniquet in it, because if you come across a car crash, chances are someone could be bleeding out and have the tourniquet.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where we are lulled into this like sense of security that doesn't matter what happens, I can call someone to help me.
Yeah.
And sometimes there is no one to help you. It happened here a couple of years ago. We had a massive storm come through, and there's an area of farmland where I live that used to be a lake. It's not a lake anymore because there's pump stations that pump the water out constantly every day. Like the water's constantly being pumped out of this area. Well, the pump station failed because of this massive storm, and it turned into a lake again. All the people there were now cut off from help. We had to call in the military to get people out. So those situations, if you were hurt, you didn't have a well thought out first aid kit or knowledge or skills to use it, like, what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and bleed until maybe someone notices? Like, these are things that were, like, when you have a preparedness and self-reliant mindset, you're always thinking about, how do I help myself? Then you start gathering the stuff together, and then you're better off, just even in daily life.
Mm.
And realistically, let's say there was this coronal mass what is it called? Coronal
Mass ejection.
Coronal mass ejection. If that happened, realistically, how long would Earth be in this state? How long would you have to survive until things would be built back up?
That's tough to say. It really depends on how big it was. If it took out the entire power grid of the entire planet, it could be years. It could be a decade.
Ooh, yeah.
Like, you could realistically see the power out for, like 10, 15, 20 years. It all comes down to, how is someone going to fix the power grid, even locally? And that's probably where you would see things happen, is that, like, say where I live, we run off a hydroelectric, and then say the power company, people start working on it, and then they were able to get the power generation from the dam up and running. Right, they're able to generate power. And then they go down the line. Okay, now this transformer is blown out, and if someone happens to know something, takes it apart. Oh, I can jury rig this thing together, and we can just kind of Mickey Mouse it, and then get powered this way.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start doing stuff like that, then you can start looking into, okay, now I've got enough power. I can run a welder. I can run a milling machine. I can run this and that. I can start now building the things I need to do to actually get power up. That's where you're going to see power being restored. It's not going to be like a global thing where some force is going to come in and fix it all for us. It's going to be all very local, because we're no longer going to be a global community. We're going to be a bunch of individual areas completely cut off from each other, and all the local people banding together to fix the power grid locally. And that is where I would see it happening. But I just don't think anyone's got the knowledge in a lot of areas to really fix what's going to be broken.
No.
So
But most likely we will all be dead.
Most of
That's
us.
very likely.
Yeah.
That's
because we will have other things to worry about, like food, water, basic survival, right? Sanitation.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of things we're going to have to be thinking about, and getting the power grid back online is going to be really low on the priority list.
yeah.
So we're going to survive for decades, basically.
Without any electricity and without any communication too. It's going to go back to some sort of tribal mentality. Hunter-gatherer mentality. People warring against people. It's not going to be... And the people in charge are not going to be the smartest people. It's going to be the strongest people.
Yeah.
It's going to be way more reliant on people's physical appearance and less on people's intelligence, as we see right now, where it's more the other way around. So it's going to be really different society. And I definitely think that could be one of the risks for how to say, extension.
Yeah, it will be. I have a hard time believing that even I have a hard time believing that a lot of things would actually make us extinct, because we survived quite a few things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there was, I can't remember what it was. It was a few 100,000 years ago. They were pretty sure that the human race was knocked down to like a few thousand people. Like there's been events before where they're pretty sure that we were almost wiped out, and we're able to get through it. We're able to survive. I think even if a comet hit our planet, like we would probably be able to. A few of us would be
There
able
would
to survive.
always be someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone's gonna make it out. Like
And
we're
story of
pretty
Atlantis.
resilient. Like
Mhm.
we're a pretty extraordinary species on this planet.
Yeah,
We're
true.
and the people who are gonna survive, they're gonna like. Hopefully, we get the right people. Like hopefully that we don't have like the just the strongest, or it's the strongest and the smartest, or at least the smartest and with the strongest. Like
Yeah.
hopefully the right people are the ones of the 10% that
Yeah.
do actually make it through.
Gonna be up in the air. Who is that? That will be. That's gonna be completely lottery.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what about right now? Like if we go a little bit away from extinction theories and stuff, just your daily life. Are you living some sort of off-grid life, or do you do anything off-grid right now?
No, not. I do. I have the ability to run my refrigeration basically off grid. The house itself, it's on the grid. It would be too costly for me to actually set it up to be an off grid house. It would require a lot of batteries, a lot of power. But I have the solar panels, I have the batteries, I have power stations. I can run a lot of it off grid. I've got enough solar panels that I could make a pretty good go of it. I basically have enough that my 2 fridges and my freezer would be totally fine, like without any issues, almost indefinitely. I'm an amateur radio operator, so all my radios can run off grid. Like, and that's basically how I do it. I don't connect it to grid power. So my communications ability is all 100% off grid. I don't require the grid at all. And that includes digital communications. I can send emails over radio frequencies without requiring the grid at all. Even like just basically text messaging through the grid or through radio. Like, so my ability to communicate with the rest of the planet is like
Still
pretty
there.
good,
Yeah.
and it's completely absent of the grid altogether. And then basically, I think because I'm a hunter and outdoorsman, like I have all the supplies to like cook and live without having to require the grid. It's like if the grid went down, it would be definitely a shock to the system, but I'd be pretty okay with it for quite a while. The issues come with things like sanitation. When you start losing the ability to like get rid of your waste, that's the thing that always kind of I think about in the back of my mind is, okay, like when the toilets stop working, then what? And I don't really have a super great option for that.
Dig a hole.
It's a big issue because sanitation is a massive issue.
But
and
then-
it's one that we don't think of.
We were actually visiting a guy up in Denmark. They have few off-grid places, and what he had done is that he had a normal toilet, and he was not on the grid.
He made a sewage system, right?
It was a septic tank, and it actually went down, and it went one septic tank where there was another septic tank kind of hooked up to that, and then it would take only the water and would go out and it would actually nourish his plants without, and he would be eating the plants, and even in his big greenhouse, you couldn't smell anything.
And he used it for fertilizer.
So it's doable.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's a big, and I don't even think you're allowed to do it properly where you live.
Well, it wouldn't even be possible. The area I live in is all clay underneath. Like digging digging in my backyard is it's a night.
What is your take on? Because I was thinking about something. So you have this whole grid system. It kind of reminds me a little bit about, back in the day when you have the phone system. If there, for instance, is a war, all you got to do is attack one point, and then the whole fucking country is out. Like back in the day, then you couldn't communicate, and that's why they came up with the internet for the router system, so that if you attack one router, the whole system will still be up, and you'll be able to communicate. And I kind of see the grid or the energy system a little bit in the same way, because we kind of have the ability to make a similar router system, or not a router system, but kind of like everyone can make their own energy and everyone can kind of live off grid and help each other out, but we're not really allowed to, because those big grid systems is controlled by the big companies who's backing up the politicians to make, to keep them running. What's your take on the technology we have right now compared to the system we have? Would it be more sensible and better if we were able to live more and allowed to live more off grid than we are?
It would be. The technology exists to run solar panels and to have battery banks in your house. Well, some power companies will, if you have solar panels on your house and your house is not 100% off grid, but you have solar backup power on your house, some power companies will actually discount your rate of how much money you're paying for your power, because your solar panels will feed power back into the grid. So they'll take that power and they'll give you a bit of a discount. Some companies will do that. I believe California is one of them. There's a lot of places there because they have such problems with the power. They don't have enough, basically.
Yeah.
So in areas like that where you are actually have scenarios where there's not enough power, they do that. Other places, I know locally, you can hook up solar panels. The power company doesn't mind you doing that, but then they won't give you a discount if you feed power back into the grid. They'll basically just take that power for free.
Yeah.
So there is some incentives out there. There's not enough incentives to make it worthwhile for the average person to put the capital investment up.
Yeah.
Because you're not really, even if you're running a lot of your house off the power, you're not really getting enough of a benefit from it to justify the upfront cost.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard for people to justify doing. I do though see more solar panels going up. So I think there's a lot of people out there thinking along the more long-term lines, because I've noticed a lot more solar panels. I've noticed a lot more solar panels in new builds too.
Yeah.
So there are people out there who are doing it. The technology exists. We could do it very easily. You could do it. You could very easily have every new house build solar panels and battery system.
Yeah.
And the amount of cost, like considering the house prices around my area, you wouldn't even notice the additional
No, exactly.
10, 15,000
Yeah,
that
you
would
would
be in
save
the
so
rates.
much money each. But
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's also the whole thing. It just seems so inefficient to me, that we're in so much risk for these catastrophes, and those risks could be decreased by so much if we were allowed, and if there was incentives to make us go a little bit more off grid and do things that would be good for us, Yeah. That was just a
Yeah,
little.
no, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was a fascinating talk. I have definitely learned a lot.
But yeah.
I think I need to re-listen to this episode and take notes, actually.
Yeah, reevaluate. Also because the things that you have thought about
Yeah.
are more in depth than than the normal person think about. Because when you see those movies, there's always a little part of me that's like, fuck, I wish that was true. I wish I was one of those guys.
It is super exciting in a way.
But then you rethink it, and when you've been on a survival trip, you're like, oh, fuck, I'm happy I'm going home after 3 days,
Yeah.
It's not always as fun as you think it is. But that's why it's so important to know these little tricks with the water, with the fire, what you got to get ready, how to circle,
Yeah.
So, very good, very fascinating. And, thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. It was fun. I enjoyed this.
Yeah,
For
we're
sure.
happy to hear that too. And
So, is this on a last note? Is it relevant for a regular person to go all in as you are? Realistically,
I think for the average person, I think just going step by step is probably the best idea.
Mhm.
Like think about water first, think about power, and then start thinking about food and all the other things. Like I think having enough water on hand is probably the first step for everyone. Going all in, I mean, like you really got to think about things. Like
Yeah.
it takes a lot and you really got to start developing quite a skill set to make everything work. But if I was to suggest anyone who's thinking, oh man, this is too much, just get your water squared away, because water is going to be the one thing that is going to totally screw you over. If you drink bad water once in a disaster scenario,
yeah,
you
fucked.
could potentially die.
Mm.
And you can't live for more than 3 days without
yeah,
water.
diarrhea.
So
yeah.
that's your number one. Make sure you have access to clean potable water. And then after that, definitely get my book
Yeah.
and have it on your bookshelf at the very least.
Yeah, for sure.
Like if you book, even if you don't build anything right away and the grid goes down, if you have the physical book, you can look at it, you can start scrounging for stuff, scavenging, and then you could probably build a lot of stuff in there. For a disaster. Get the book, get your water squared away, and then start thinking about power and food. And just be ready for if you're ready for a couple of weeks on your own.
Yeah.
I think you're got a good start.
Mm.
Okay, that's good to hear. And
And this is the book for the viewers.
yeah, and I guess we have a question now that we want to ask all the guests, and that doesn't really make sense in this one, because is it even possible to be vegetarian if this is the situation? You have to go meat diet, right?
You already know the answer.
Yeah, I know the answer, but I have to ask.
Yeah, I don't think
No.
being a vegetarian. No, I don't think so. You gotta eat meat.
Yeah.
You gotta have protein.
You had the answer.
Yeah, I already knew. But yeah,
All right, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
It was a
thank
pleasure.
you so much. And
Well, thank you.
yeah,
Sure. Take care, man.
yeah.